Today's episode is brought to you by Terry's Turpentine, offering natural solvents of unnatural quality. And for this month only, Terry's is offering 2-for-1 deals on selected home products. Tuesdays are twice as nice at Terry's.
Life jackets are stored in overhead racks on the second level. Paired in storage boxes on the top deck. Instructions for donning life jackets are located around the vessel.
Episode 12.
Anchors away on the final episode of season 3.
Congratulations.
Season 1 on the new platform, by the way.
Season 3, though. So this is number 36 overall, number 12 this year.
Because we do 12.
And if we proceed with our big plan of some biographies for the next season, then we'll be on hiatus for a season from the shipwrecks.
Correct. But I think this has been a jam-packed season in terms of the ships that we presented, a great variety.
And maybe it'll give
exciting.
the Odyssey Marine Exploration Company a little bit of time to sort of turn it around. And
I did feel bad. I felt bad after last episode in which we did have to uncover some perhaps not flattering details related to the Odyssey Shipwreck Company, of which you are a significant shareholder.
Yeah, I'm hoping they'll turn it around. I went and looked at their website or
Not doing well.
their financial disclosures or whatever. I noticed they don't even mention the shipwrecks nowadays. They're all about underwater minerals and that kind of stuff. So
That's what we meant by Odyssey.
like I would never have invested in them if that was the business. Like, harvesting.
Or if you had an advisor, like someone to say like, hey, hold on, wait, what'd you just say you're going to invest in? Let's slow your roll.
I know,
investor.
it would, if we had started this podcast much earlier, that would have scratched my shipwreck itch, the podcast.
Yeah, had I been graded more fairly, that whole thing. Albert Brooks.
But because we weren't doing the podcast, I still had the Shipwreck Jones, and I think I was reading some of these stories in the news, and it was always Odyssey Marine. I was like, that sounds like the company that's right on top of it. But I didn't.
Yeah, it sounds like you've rationalized it, justified it, or whatever. But my point is, it does show that it's in your DNA to care about shipwrecks, whether you could profit off them through some third-party company, vehicle, investment, whatever. The fact that you're still here talking about shipwrecks tells me that it's a subject of interest to you.
Absolutely. Episode 12, let's just run through a couple of quick facts about the number 12. You got any?
I do not.
12 months in the year.
12 Angry Men, right?
There's 12 Angry Men.
12 jurors.
I thought you were going to say it's in our system of government that we have 12 angry men.
We have a lot more than that.
I think Christ had 12 angry disciples.
In most cities in which we root for our football team, the number 12 is symbolic of the fans, right? Like the 12th man.
Oh,
Yes.
Good point.
Thank you.
Good point. 12 is the number of donuts that you get if you're doing it correctly.
I thought you get like a baker's dozen. Don't you get the extra donut? No?
Good point.
I don't know.
Good point.
But still, a feat. And my point is that I really look back and say, well, solid season. A variety of ships,
absolutely.
Good ships all around.
Anyway, let's get right into it.
Episode 12. This is the final episode of the season. You will be presenting a ship. Super excited to hear about it. Let's get going.
Okay, so as I said last time, I love the Vikings. So I really wanted to get back to the Vikings.
Yes, you mentioned the Vikings last episode.
Now, there's some wrinkles to this one. The 2 Viking ships I did in the first season were
outstanding.
Were interesting, but they had been underwater for a long time. There was a lot of, in one case, the ship itself had totally deteriorated and disappeared, and there were just like the grindstones that were left. Once upon a time, you did a podcast. You did a presentation about a ship called the Delmenhorst. Do you remember that one? And you said this is gonna set the record for shallow depth recovery. I think that one was in what?
It seemed like I want to say 20 feet, but it was
like 11
less.
feet.
Yeah, it was very shallow.
Today, I'm gonna break that record.
What?
Yeah. Little wrinkle here. And I know.
Talk about your season finale. You're not only giving the final ship, you're breaking records on the final episode.
It's a little bit gimmicky, and I know you're going to challenge whether it fits into the mission statement of this show. Do you still have your challenges, or did you already use your coach's challenge?
I may have used one earlier when you were
Okay, so then that means you have no timeouts left and no challenges left. So I'm just going to proceed. And the reason I did this is one of the things that was frustrating to me about the two ships I presented in the first season is, as I said, they had fallen apart so much that you didn't, you got to see some of the artifacts that had been on those ships, but you didn't get to see like
yes.
exactly what classic golden era Viking age ships looked like. Okay.
Right. Very true. Still compelling stories, but
And
yes.
when I talk about the golden age of Vikings, we're talking like 800s, 900s, 1000s,
Charlemagne. Isn't that
1100s.
Charlemagne? Like the 800s.
And these guys were bad asses. Okay. They're in Scandinavia. They're based sort of what is today Sweden, Norway, Denmark, that kind of thing.
Yes.
But they are
Yes.
getting all over the world. They're getting as
Oof.
far east as Asia. They're getting down into the Mediterranean. They're really,
The
yeah. Oh yeah,
Mediterranean? Wait, the Vikings were in the
absolutely.
Mediterranean? See, now here is my concern with the skin. Scandinavian skin in the Mediterranean? Aren't they? They're
Yeah.
going to get burned.
You're going to want to put, I don't know what they were using back then, maybe like some whale blubber or something, just smear it on there. And you
Wow.
know what else they did? They got to North America a hell of a lot earlier than Columbus. Are you aware of that?
No, I am not aware of that.
Yeah, there's a settlement in Nova
Okay.
Scotia that testing has since shown came from, it was a Viking settlement,
Wow.
and it seems like they only stayed there 10 or 20 years. So it wasn't a
Okay.
long-term
Sure, but
settlement,
they were there
but like, yeah, they were in North America
in
first.
their Viking ship?
Yeah, I mean, because they were already
Wow.
going to Iceland, to Greenland, and then
Right.
eventually they get all the way over to Nova Scotia. Total badasses. And a place where the
Incredible.
Vikings really wreaked havoc was like England, France, Germany, Ireland, Scotland, all that. They were really just, they did
Barbaric.
what they wanted in those places, and they would show up. They would they were using their ships to get there, but then they'd get onto land for the warfare and the raids and the pillaging and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
Very scary. But
Very
you're saying
scary.
that they crossed the ocean.
Yes, they did. And that's been proven by now. Like I said, it wasn't a long-standing settlement. They didn't stay there for a long time,
Well,
but
I think I mentioned last week when you brought up the subject of Vikings. My point last week was I very much, as a child, enjoyed the comic strip Hagar,
yeah.
who was a Viking.
Yeah, but not a scary one.
He was not. He was hilarious, though. Right? He was
the
Norwegian.
best.
My favorite thing, and we've also referenced Hamlet, his son Hamlet, who used to say, like, hey, is it okay that I tell people we're Norwegian? And Hagar used to say, like, well, it might sound like we're bragging. Very proud of being a Norwegian. So, anyways, but I love the fact that he had such poor hygiene. Like, I was very much a Hagar fan. He
Yeah.
was sort of this barbarian, but like he's cute.
Yeah, and sort of like I think the word is phlegmatic, kind of like
Yes.
just doesn't get, not excitable. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like
But he had
very
the
kind of
operatic
chill.
wife with the blonde, braids.
Yeah, what was her
That was a
name?
great, I don't remember her name, but the comic strip was really great.
Nova Scotia. I said Nova Scotia, Newfoundland.
Mm.
Newfoundland. So they got to
Same
the
difference.
place where Newfies now live.
Got it.
Anyway, so here's the point. They got
Yes.
there around the year 1000. So that's
Wow.
a good 500 years before Columbus, Johnny come lately shows
Yeah,
up.
exactly. Gets all the credit.
Yeah. Now you might ask, well, how are they doing this? They're getting all
Incredible.
over the world. Tell me a little bit about their ships.
Yeah.
The Viking ship fascinates me.
Yeah, you've always been interested in that.
And that's why I picked the ship that we're going to talk about today. They're
Can't wait.
really
Mhm.
long. They're fairly thin, and they have a very shallow draft. The boat doesn't sit too deep in the water,
Right.
and they have a very, like, I was going to say aerodynamic hull, but it's almost like hydrodynamic hull. It's like
Wow.
it swells out in the middle, but then when you get to the front and the back of the ship, it really narrows out almost to a point. And then they also had the elaborate carvings that, like, do you remember with the
Right.
Vasa where you were talking about,
Yes.
oh, they put all this effort into the
Years
carvings?
of effort.
Now, in the case of the Vasa, part of what frustrates me about the Vasa is that, okay, cool. Yeah, you had the carvings, and yes, it turns out that there was a rich, rich Viking history of woodwork and carvings and all that stuff. But like, when did you guys forget? But when did you guys forget how to build boats?
Right.
Like, in the 800s and 900s, you're building these amazing boats that, early on, they're mostly propelled by oarsmen. They've got
Strong guys.
up to like 30 like places, oar holes along the
Right.
hull, and,
Yes.
30 guys.
It's like crew. It's like, the
You
best of
got
the
the
crew team.
crew,
Yeah.
but then they start to mix a little bit with the Europeans, and they see what Europeans are doing with sails, and they
Right.
move into a hybrid thing where you get the sails and the
They're
oarsmen.
not opposed to technology, by the way.
Now, but the reason I mention all this about how incredible their ships are, and my frustration with the two that
Longship. Yeah.
the two that I talked about the first season is like, okay, well, we never got to see the ship. They had really fallen apart. Here's the other cool thing about the Vikings, and this is where you may call bullshit, but the ship I'm doing today is the Oseberg ship. Okay.
Oseberg. Don't know
The
that ship.
Oseberg ship is probably the most famous surviving example of a Viking ship. And it was built in sort of like the late 820s.
820s.
Yeah.
That's a long time ago.
Yeah. It's about 70 feet long, 16 feet wide. And this one was built, there are different types of Viking ships. Some were built so that, yeah, we can get over to Iceland, or we can get to Greenland,
Right.
or, hell, if we're feeling.
These are open water ships, though.
Well, those guys, so certain of the Viking ships, like, yeah, the guys that want to try to get all the way to Newfoundland, then this is the ship for them. The Oseberg ship that I'm focusing on today was used more for also a common need of the Vikings, which is really getting around the coast of Norway, the coast what's today Norway, and the coast of what's today Sweden, and going up rivers and going up fjords.
Right.
So these ones are not wouldn't have done as well in the high seas, and that's what the Oseberg ship is. Now, you may say, well, great, why haven't we heard about this? And where did they find where did they find it?
And quickly,
Yeah.
how big, you say? How long?
70 feet long.
But so this was not a ship that was going across the Atlantic. It was going
No, this
along
is
the
like a coast hopper, built mostly out of oak, and it has that thing that you've probably seen in images of Viking ships where it's like both the prow and the stern have like they rise up, and there's like a curly Q at the top of the
like a
prow.
snake.
Yeah. A beast.
Love that they took that time for detail.
They loved the carvings of the mythological creatures, the things that you can't really tell exactly what it is. Like, is it a cat?
Right.
Is it a dragon? Is it a serpent? What the hell is this thing?
Right, but it looks cool.
Now, the other thing about the Vikings, though, is they had very elaborate, I'm talking about like the pre-Christian Vikings, before Christianity kind of infiltrates the Viking area.
Right, way before our time.
They had, yeah, way before our time. They had very elaborate beliefs about the afterlife and what becomes of us in the afterlife and what you would need. I gotta say, the more I read about Vikings, the more I wonder, like, God, as I said last time, some of these guys are just psychotic. I mean, some of the warfare with the so-called berserkers who dress up in animal skins.
I've never heard that.
And they're just like the most hardcore of the hardcore fighters.
Did you say the berserkers?
The berserkers, and that term berserkers, I think, comes from the word for bearskin. So they would wear animal skins.
Yes,
and anything
that seems more in character.
Yeah, and anything goes.
Right.
decapitation, having
Ooh,
sex with anybody you run
that I'm not
across.
condoning any of that. I stop at animal skins. Like, I'm not even in favor of animal skins. I'm an animal lover. Feed animals, don't eat them. I'm fine with that. But my point is, wow, like some barbaric behavior.
And the more you read about it, the other thing about Viking times is like there's a million little tiny kingdoms within, what's today Norway and Sweden. And when you read about the royal families talk about barbaric behavior, it's
Uh-oh.
like, this one got married but didn't like her husband, so she had him killed. And then, also killed his child from a previous, all that, like, just or this one married into this royal family, but did she really marry into it? It seems like more she was just abducted and
Right.
raped and then brought back, and then she became his wife. Just very intense, very
It seems like, back then, lots of things were way more intense.
but like when I read about ancient Rome, I guess it's true.
Right.
Ancient Rome, ancient Greece. There, I think Nero killed his wife or killed his mom or something.
Oh,
Yeah, I
right.
guess you're right. Maybe
We talked
humans.
about Henry VIII. I mean,
Yeah,
things happen.
good
Things
point.
happen. But definitely a different time. Then you wonder, like, well, we haven't evolved so much as a human species in which we can't relate to the person that was living back then and making those decisions. And that's what's a little scary.
Yeah. Yeah, these Vikings, I think, could show up in my nightmares. After reading about them, they tapped into some deep anxieties for me. These guys were super hardcore, and also, as you've noticed in the past, I like to stop and discuss the name of a ship or the name of a pirate. Is this a good name or is this a bad name?
Yes.
The
Did the Vikings
Vikings.
name ships?
Well, they didn't fuck around when it came to the nicknames that their leaders, warriors, kings had. So, there's a famous king named Eric Blood Axe.
Right. That's appropriate.
He was
Right.
also known as Brother Slayer.
Whoa, that seems like what happened to his brother. It's a little too on the nose, right? Like, let's use a little creativity next time.
Brother Slayer, so is that like metaphorical? Or because I thought
You had two brothers?
because I thought you had said your brother had gone on vacation. I didn't know that. Okay. The other one I love is King Harold Bluetooth. Are you aware of this whole thing?
No, never heard that. I think that's a technology, right? Bluetooth?
The technology is named after that Viking
You gotta
king
be kidding me.
because what he was known for, well, first of all, he had like a dead tooth. He had like a black or blue tooth. What he was known for
Wireless technology?
was sort of uniting
And managing his rights in perpetuity? Like,
like I said, there used to be a bunch of mini little fiefdoms and kingdoms, and this guy was powerful enough and strategic enough that he kind of conquered and united all of the different kingdoms in Denmark. So he's known for uniting and bringing under one tent, all these different jurisdictions.
now I'm a bigger fan of Bluetooth.
And then because I think the early people who were working on that technology were connecting to that idea of uniting different areas, uniting different technologies, having something that would work, whether it's with Apple or PC, with this kind of headphone or that kind of headphone. And in fact, that little symbol that you see whenever you're looking on your computer, Bluetooth, and that's a rune. That was his sign.
The runestones is how those guys recorded history, right?
Yeah. Another name I love, King Ethelred the Unready.
Very unsubtle. The unready.
Yeah, and it doesn't sound like he probably lasted all that long. Now, revisionist history, because there's always revisionist historians.
That does remind me of Hagar the Terrible, the comic strip. Because, one of the characters, his friend Lucky Eddie,
No.
who's like notoriously unlucky,
Yeah.
but he's named Lucky. And they never reveal his real name until like some much later episode in which his name is Fortuitous Eduardo.
Now, revisionist historians tell us that King Ethelred the Unready, it's not like he was just unprepared himself. It was that he was poorly advised. He didn't get the information from his advisors to prepare him for whatever the big emergency was. Okay, blah, blah, blah. Now, Anyway, my point is, this is where you're going to challenge me. You're going to say, dude, shipwreck.
Mm.
This is a burial ship. Okay, this is a
Ooh,
ship that's found under earth. Okay, this is a ship that
interesting.
once had served in the fjords and the rivers and along the coast, but then at a
Put
certain,
in its
it
time.
had put in its time. But then when it gets to be 834, it's brought ashore. It's brought a kilometer inland. We're
834.
down in
Yes.
southern Norway, and it's going to be the burial vessel for two women. Okay,
What? The ship
the Oseberg, yeah.
you're saying is now a burial ship of two women.
Yes. So the Vikings, the reason I mentioned their elaborate beliefs about the afterlife and stuff is that they had that thing like, okay, we're going to bury our fancy people or our important people with the trappings that, the things that are going to help them in the afterlife. So a ship will help
Ah,
them get to the afterlife. Inside the ship, we're going to put things like tools or livestock or their slaves. If they had slaves, we'll
no
put
way.
them in the ship. Yeah, and if the slaves had not conveniently died by the point that it was time to do the burial, then they just killed them
Oof.
and put them in the ship. Now, the two
So this was a working ship.
working ship, but not the type they take to Newfoundland. This is the one that they're
Right.
using on the fjords. Okay. But what's great about this ship is it's first discovered. So what the Vikings would do when they buried these ships is the important people, they lay them down in the ship. They put other things in the ship, treasure, tools, whatever.
Because the Vikings, you were saying even last time, they typically will light a pyre.
Yeah, sometimes they do the funeral pyre, but they're also very much known for the burial mounds because what they do is once they bury the ship, they start to load it down over time with rocks
Mhm.
on top of it or more earth on top of it so that as the years go by, there are these huge mounds that can be, 30 feet high, 50 feet high,
What?
and 100 feet long, just out in fields. And then that mound, in essence, serves
Got it.
also as a shrine. So it's like, okay, well, that is
Right.
where King whoever, left this world, and we can come and gather there. And
So is status indicated by the size of the mound?
sure, I tell you what, though, it definitely makes the archaeology simpler because it's like, okay, I'm looking at a big field and there's a huge mound in the center.
Not like you put leaves over it and then no one's gonna notice. This is like a gigantic mound in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah. The other thing I love about the Vikings is it seems like all over the United Kingdom, I don't know why they did this, but they would occasionally, either for safekeeping or because they had to leave a spot quickly, they would bury a hoard of treasure, coins, weapons, whatever. And nowadays, these jamokes with their metal detectors find these things.
Incredible.
Detectorists in England are still finding Viking hoards. Okay. Anyway, the Oseberg ship. So it's first discovered in the year early 20th
Mhm.
century. It's found. The first time archaeologists start to dig around, figure out, oh, wait a minute. This not only does there appear to be a Viking ship here, this one compared to other ones, it's been under a burial mound, so it has been broken into pieces and stuff, but like all the pieces are in really good shape.
Wow.
So
From 800, that's crazy.
over time, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to
Right.
put it back together. Like it actually is a fairly straightforward process of putting the pieces back together.
Mhm.
They do that, and to this day, well, not to this day, the museum's temporarily closed in Oslo, but this is considered like the Viking ship to see, the
Wait, so
Oseberg ship.
in terms of deterioration or how the ship can survive underwater versus buried in the earth, I wonder is that
There we go.
okay, well, I believe we have a new ad that was submitted from our good friends at Harmony.
Great.
You spoke to them, or I think that came in through Lizzie this week.
Lizzie handles the harmony stuff, which I feel like, look, dude, I'm a lawyer. I should talk to them like lawyer to lawyer, but Lizzie.
No, you talking about this, and I feel like this is a conflict.
Well, also, I mean, would you ever hire a lawyer who was dumb enough to invest in the Odyssey Marine Exploration Company? Like,
Yeah,
I don't.
I think investment advising and legal advice are two different things. I'm not judging you on your abilities as a lawyer, certainly questioning your abilities as an investor or as someone who can make good judgment on sound investments.
My point is, I was like, oh, Lizzie, I can jump on that call. Let's call them together. And she was, I mean, honestly, she was a little bit like proprietary or like territorial. She's like, no, this is my relationship. I
But she's
got this.
following company policy, right? Brainstorm doesn't allow you in particular to weigh in on these types of things.
Bottom line, anyway, she dealt with them this week.
Appropriately
And
so.
so they gave us the new script. We got a new ad. Let's run it. Have you been arrested for boating while drunk? Or perhaps you're in the middle of a messy divorce and you're worried about losing your boat. If either of these scenarios apply to you, call the law offices of Harmony and Hanrahan. Harmony and Hanrahan will get you back on the water.
Oh, outro bell.
That's another Lizzie special. She was the one who realized we needed something to remind us, hey, it's time to pay the bills.
We do. My question is around the ability for the ship to maintain integrity in the ground versus in the water. So what are you saying?
Well, what I'm saying is, and sometimes even when it's been in the ground, it really deteriorates. And I'm not 100% sure why. It may have had to do with the composition of the soil or that something specific to this ship. But the Oseberg ship, really, the wood, at least when they were digging it up back in 1904 for the very first time, was in amazing shape. Like the people that were digging it up were like, holy crap, look at these carvings.
Wow.
And as we always say, go check out the images when we're done because it's insane. Now, but it's not
1904.
Yeah, so that's when when they first realize that we've got a huge ship here and they start to bring it up. Now, the Norwegians, being a careful, industrious, and academic people, they've been studying it, working on it, reconstructing it, just sort of caretaking this amazing ship for the last 120 years. So they, have continued to do tests on, the wood and where the wood came from. And there were 2 women who had been buried on this ship. And it's a little bit mysterious. Yes, 2 women. No men.
I think it's super interesting that they're doing all of the tests, and that's appropriate. But realistically, in terms of like where the wood came from, or where do you think it came from? Like, do we need to spend that much time on that? Like, in terms of diverting resources, like, it came from 3 blocks away and that field behind that car.
Well, but it became a clue for who the women were because the wood came from the, because, these women were important enough people to merit this level of burial. One of the women is like 70, 80 years old, older woman. Okay.
Wait a second.
Yeah.
You're talking about the year 800 something?
Yeah.
And you're telling me that there's some woman that lived to be in her 80s?
Yeah.
I thought life expectancy is like 12.
Yeah.
Like what? That seems like that's sort of like, there's a guy living today who's 300.
No wonder they made her queen. It's like she's magic. She lived to 80.
We'll give you a ship. Actually, we'll give you half a ship.
Everybody dies at 29 except this one lady. Which we say lady, but she did suffer from a syndrome called Morgagni's syndrome. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Is she a giant? What is that?
Well, it's a hormonal imbalance or something that did lead to a very masculine appearance, possibly a little bit of a beard.
What?
Yeah, but she was a woman.
She did. work in a circus for a number of years. She was known as the Bearded Lady.
She did have various ailments, very bad arthritis. By the end, she also had cancer. She
Who
had a
didn't have
bad
arthritis in their 80s?
had a
Like,
bad had a
it seems
bad
like, "Oh,
knee.
yeah, losing his hair. He was 94."
Had a bad knee. Probably
Ooh.
had a severe limp.
Yes.
Okay.
80s. What? No, seriously, doesn't that seem abnormal to live to be that old in the 800s?
Well, part of how they know that these are important women is they could also just from their bones, they could evaluate what their diet had been, what they'd been
Ah,
eating.
right.
And whereas a lot of the
All
just
fast food.
regular folk were eating a lot of fish,
Mhm.
these guys were getting their hands on a varied diet, including lots of red meat.
Hello.
Yeah.
I'll have that steak rare. I'm good.
And once they had the steak rare, they also apparently had the use of metal toothpicks. They could
Hello.
tell from their teeth that they had used metal toothpicks. Again, a sign of status or distinction or wealth.
The fact that they had decent dental hygiene, I guess, is of some import.
Second lady is in her 50s.
A younger lady compared to the 80.
Yeah, and she doesn't have a beard. And this one, there you would think by now they would have solved it one way or the other. There's some confusion about like, okay, is the older lady the queen
Interesting.
or is the younger lady the queen? And because there was sort of a thought like, okay, one of them's a queen and the other one's like a handmaiden or like her trusty servant or her.
What about her mother? Could it have
I
been her
don't
mother?
think so. I think maybe
Okay.
they would have been able to figure that out.
Right.
They're dressed in very nice clothes, nicer clothes than regular people
Right.
get. So
Yeah.
the working hypothesis is one is a queen, the other one's a handmaiden. At first, they thought, okay, the 50-year-old looks like she has a badly broken collarbone. So for years, they said this one was a human
Played
sacrifice.
rugby?
This one was a human sacrifice at the time of the burial. They killed the handmaiden to go into the afterlife with her, to serve her in the afterlife. Okay.
Either she played rugby at university or she was a human
Well, I
sacrifice for
think
this
you
episode.
would want the one who had Morgagni syndrome to be playing the rugby.
Right.
The
Do you have a razor?
the
Yeah.
the one who had the broken collarbone, however, subsequent testing showed that the collarbone had started to heal. There were signs of healing. So it looks like,
I'll be back. I'll play next weekend. Don't
yeah,
worry.
she was like day-to-day upper body injury. She so they backed off from the whole human sacrifice
It's a pretty bold assertion.
theory,
Yes.
but now that I'm just talking through it, it does seem weird. Like, well, what? They both happened to die at the exact same time, or did you keep one of them on ice, until the other one
Whoops.
was?
Right.
Yeah. So
No, it seems like something with the collarbone and the fact that she was in her 50s and probably healthy
ish. Yeah.
ish compared to the 80-year-old. Like, you know what? Let's get a twofer. You're probably not going to live more than another 40 years tops.
One is in, I don't know if it's the older or the younger. One is in what's described as a very fine red woolen dress with
Nice.
a lozenge twill pattern
Oh, like a
and
Halls.
and a
Yeah.
and a fine white linen veil
Okay.
in a gauze weave.
Sounds
The
appropriate.
other one is also in a fancy dress, but it's the color blue.
Hmm.
And then along with them, I mean, a total haul. Like they've got these, and you got to see it to believe it, but they have these wooden sleds and sleighs that had been used in like royal processions or
Mhm.
ritual processions. And the carving is absurd. Like somebody who did it today, you'd say that guy's a genius,
These are preserved on the boat?
and these are preserved beautifully.
Wow. But they found these
These
on the ship.
sleighs. Yes. They also found a cart, with wheels, also elaborately wood carved. They found roughly 15 horses, 6 dogs,
Oh my
an
God.
oxen or an ox,
Right.
and
Oh, this was major.
Yeah, I mean, this was probably a ceremony and an event
Yeah,
that
huge,
lasted for
huge.
days, that brought hundreds of people there, that there was a massive gathering. There was they also found a wand, almost looks like a magician's wand that is associated with like ritual, religious, and the presence of this, and also cannabis seeds.
What?
Yeah.
What kind of ship is this?
Yeah. So, and so with the weed and with the wand, some people started saying, "Wait, were these royalty, or were they actually like high priestesses or witches? Basically, were they shamans?"
Are we making a mountain out of a molehill? And I'm not trying to reference the fact that these were, land burial. But my point is, really? Are we ascribing too much significance to that?
Yeah, I think we are, and I think the more solid theory is one of them was a queen, and in fact, they think they may know which queen she was.
Really?
There was a Queen Asa
Okay.
who was from the Yingling
Mm,
dynasty.
sounds exotic. Yeah.
Yeah. And she, just based on her remains, she's from the same area where the ship is constructed,
Okay.
and she's from the same area where that queen was known to have been. This queen is an example of what I was talking about with the barbaric sort of interpersonal relations. Her first husband was somebody who kidnapped her and raped her
Yeah.
and forced her to bear a child.
Right.
Within a year.
Started off rocky, and we grew to like each other.
Yeah, that didn't happen. A
Ouch.
year into the marriage, when he was in a drunken stupor, she had a servant kill him.
Which is the other way to avoid legal fees, right?
Yeah, so there was like no official paperwork. There was no lawyers. It's more just like, I killed him.
Can someone pass
I'm
me a runestone? I'm gonna just put a quick document together, and can you guys leave the room? Get this guy out of here.
she moved back to her home area where the Yingling dynasty was. She, incidentally, Queen Asa was the daughter of King Harold Redbeard.
Totally appropriate. Again, spot on. Not a lot of irony. Love the name.
Her son was known as Halfdan the Black.
Sounds appropriate as well.
And then her grandson is Harold Fairhair. I mean, they stick these nicknames on all these people, and it's usually just something about their appearance.
Something
So it's like
absurdly
the guy,
obvious about
you
their
had
appearance.
King Bluetooth, or Harold Redbeard, and they're all named Harold or Harold or Harold Haroldson, or And the other thing is, they were really, these Vikings in England, Scotland, Ireland, France. They're there for hundreds of years and interbreeding, you know what I mean?
Right.
Like having kids. So there's a lot of Viking stock in those places.
Yeah, they were all over the place.
And it's really, I don't think it's really until the middle of the 11th century that England sort of gets its England back and kind of kicks the Vikings out, and then they're back to like English kings. And I'm probably making all sorts of basic errors in English history. Okay, now this ship, the Oseberg ship, is just stunning.
So they
to
bring
look
it.
at.
They bring it out of the ground, and what do they do
They
with
bring
it?
it-
Like, how they restore it, and how is it preserved?
They take it to Oslo, and like I said, the wood is in good shape. It's just broken into a lot of pieces, but they said it's not complicated to put them back
Nice.
together. It's almost like a puzzle where it's like, oh yeah, this one does seem to fit in here. And it is that nice clinker built style of ship where on the hull it's like overlapping boards.
So cool. Like that's a great way to build a ship.
Now, one thing that's complicated, the reason the museum in Oslo, which is called appropriately enough the Viking Ship Museum,
again, in keeping with the fact that they name things in the most obvious way, not criticizing Redbeard. Why do you call him oh, okay.
Yeah, or Brother Slayer.
Yeah, not leaving a lot to the imagination, but fair enough.
It's a bummer that he just slaughtered his brother. On the other hand, it does give us an easy name to call him from here on out. Brother Slayer.
Yeah.
Your Brother Slayer. I feel like Native Americans, Indians do a little bit of that. Like,
Same thing.
killed a
Same thing.
moose.
Chief running
Yeah.
bath. Why is he okay, I get it. He takes a bath every
Uh,
night.
Now, one thing about an anomaly with the ship is that whatever the coating was, like the sort of like varnish or I don't know what you would call it, but whatever the coating was has sort of kept the wood intact. But what they've discovered through the years is that just underneath that, the wood is falling apart, and so they're very worried.
It's from the 800s. Like, what do you expect from this wood? I get it. It's oak. It's a great forest, but Jesus, this is from
So
the
the
800s.
experts were saying like, it still looks great, and we're glad that the museum, you're letting people come through here every day, and it's amazing. It's one of the most famous things in Norway is this ship, and everybody likes to come see it. But
Wow.
what we're trying to tell you is that underneath that thin like outer layer, the wood is literally like turning into dust. And so for years
Mm.
they've been saying we need to close this museum down and do something with the ship, whether it's like take it apart and retreat
Wow.
the wood or whatever, because otherwise it's at the point where it's about to collapse.
Oh, no. So what do they
So
do?
they've closed the museum and now they're working on it to
Oh,
try to figure out, okay, how do we,
to this
yeah,
day.
exactly. So you can't, if you go to Oslo now, basically it shut down in 2021 and they're hoping
Okay.
to reopen in 2025 with the ship fortified and fully on display again.
Incredible.
An incredible ship.
And do they have the other items, artifacts on display? Like all the stuff related to what they found on the ship?
Yes, yes. I mean, even like the skeletons, they do that thing that you see at like the
Wow.
National or the Natural History Museum where they kind of mount the skeletons so you get a rough idea of what the shape of it was.
Wow.
I do think that I saw in one place that all the animals had been decapitated, which
Oh my
again,
God.
of a piece with what these Vikings were about. Like it just like really a violent culture.
That seems entirely unnecessary. Like if you're sacrificing animals, like why are you cutting off their head?
Yeah. I mean, they just, and some of the religious ceremonies involved guys having sex with, various women, like going from one sort of structure to another and having sex with it just like,
Hence their reputation as barbarians, right?
yeah.
Like they exhibit barbaric behavior.
And not all of them. I mean, they also were talented in they also knew how to grow things.
Beards. They grow beards, long beards, red beards. Yeah.
Even the women were growing beards. But they were also, they were also trading. So, and some of the ships would have a slightly different design if they were going to be mainly, their purpose was going to be like a cargo ship. Like the one
Right.
I did the first season that had all those grindstones,
Yeah.
like that wasn't a warship. That one was a cargo ship.
Right, but this one had the unique carving on the front that you described, which is
This one is
really cool. I mean,
amazing.
that's incredible. Like the fact that they have that level of craftsmanship. We're talking like what are they using? Like what tools? It's pretty impressive.
I want to say like an ads.
I don't know if they're taking out ads for like the right trade.
Isn't there something called like an ad? I
It
don't know.
sounds familiar, like an ADZ. Like what is that? That sounds like
Yeah,
something like my old shop teacher. Hey, you ever use a ad? No. Can you hand me that hacksaw?
I was so bad in shop.
I still have the box I made in shop, and it's an inordinate amount of putty that I had to use to get various sides to all
I
fit
was
together.
in summer camp and I could tell right off the bat, I'm not going to be able to build any of the things, the options they're giving us. Do you want to build this or this or this? So I picked the simplest thing, which was like, oh, you can just do a belt. Like the belt's already made and all you do is you use like the punch. You use the punching, the punches. And so I was like, oh, this is perfect. I'm going to make a belt for my older brother, Ken. He was a big fan
Yes.
of the band, the Allman Brothers. Yeah. But what I just,
I always got confused whether it was almond or almond.
so I couldn't find that day the capital letter L. So I just said, well, the capital letter I looks like a lowercase letter L. So anyway,
Oh,
a month later, I presented this belt to my brother that says the Amen Brothers. It's like AIIMAN. And then, like a good brother, he wore it for years, his Amen Brothers
of
belt.
course.
Okay. My point is the elaborate carvings on this ship are, a lot of them display what's called the gripping beast style of
Hmm.
carving, also known as the Oseberg style. And it's just
Wow.
these sort of like things like designs where the beast is intermingled with other things like geometric patterns or
Sure.
mythological characters. Like the Vikings had a rich mythology. I think there was a deity Odin.
Yes,
Um,
Odin. 12 sons. Hey,
here
episode
we go.
12. Didn't Odin have 12
I
sons?
don't know. I think didn't Jacob have 12 sons? Somebody had 12 sons. So, but the gripping beast style, you've got these like mythological looking beasts, and they've got, their limbs are sort of stretched out and encircling different things, and then they're gripping on either to geometric patterns or to heroic figures. So that's the gripping beast.
And you have to figure that there were very few people that could do that level of design, right? It's not like everyone had that talent. So someone must have been designated to do that design.
Do you think that guy was like a prima donna? Like they had to sweet talk him? But it does help explain to me something I thought was very weird when you were describing that ship from a few hundred years later, the Vasa. Well, more than a few hundred, like 800 years later, where it
Yes.
was like, why are they spending all this time on the carvings? But now I'm realizing, like, oh, there's a very long, rich history in these beautiful carvings. The problem is by the time the Vasa's built, they've forgotten how to build ships.
That's the problem. They had no real design sensibility.
Whereas the Vikings, man, they built
Incredible.
incredible ships. And the thing that I like about them is, when you and I talked about not only the Vasa, but the Delmenhorst and the Mary Rose and it's like these big gunboats. They're going to be like the modern warboats, but they
Yes.
are not stable.
Flawed. Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like they're a little bit of a breeze can tip them over, or the gun
Right.
parts, or and they're
What?
just
Yeah.
because of the gun decks and because the amount of they're not stable. The Viking ones are the exact opposite. I mean, these things are like
Elegantly built.
they're really a marvel of design.
Across the Atlantic. I had no idea.
And like I said, when you look at the images, note how thin and sort of sharp they get at the top and then at the stern, and then how they really swell out in the middle, but it's all with a shallow draft. So it's a very odd
Incredible.
thing.
Very distinct.
Yeah. And it was bad news. If you were on the coast of France or Germany or England, you saw something that shape showing up, it's like that's where, the burning and the pillaging ensues.
Yeah, scary, but incredible. Like that they had that level of, craftsmanship back then with the tools available, building these ships that could cross the Atlantic.
Yeah. I mean, and the other thing is you can see why they were proud of their ships, and that one of the ways that you would exalt somebody who died, a member of royalty who had died or an important person who had died, so yeah, bury them in one of these incredible ships.
Right. What could be more sort of significant and respectful is like, this is what we're known for. This is our expertise. You are getting the best of the best. You can take it into eternity.
Yeah. Some people have said, well, it does seem weird, to bury a lot of really valuable, beautiful stuff. Like, I get that they want to use it in the afterlife, but it's like, wouldn't your kids or your grandkids like to have that in
Right.
And one theory,
Perhaps, Bobby could use those, tools.
one theory is that it was a way to keep Bobby and his siblings from killing each other after the
Interesting.
funeral.
Right.
Because like if there is a vast estate to fight over, then
Good
people are going to rip each other to shreds. Like I said, these guys were hardcore. It's like, and I know we're deep in the show for me to bring
Yes.
it back to professional ice hockey, but it reminds me, like, the Vikings were like the enforcer. On a team you got like the fighter, like the guy who's just insane.
Marty McSorley.
Yeah, McSorley, yeah, or Bob Probert, or
Yeah.
just scary dudes.
Scary
The
guy.
person who's not only big and scary looking, but also seems to delight in the mayhem they're caught. Like they're kind of
Right.
smiling and laughing
Ooh,
while they're
scary.
punching somebody's teeth out. Anyway, so the Vikings, they're that guy.
Right. Super scary.
At least the warrior the people in the warrior class. And I'm sure, there were all kinds of all types. There had to be some people who were, back home tending the farm or raising the kids or whatever. I'm just talking about, the really intense ones that would go out and conquer foreign settlements. There was also some of these people that are the Vikings when they're going all the way to Iceland or all the way to Greenland or all the way to Nova Scotia, or rather Newfoundland. It's not just like, oh, these are our best navigators. Often it's people who've been kicked out of the home base.
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, this guy is unmanageable. Like, he won't even, like, he would kill everybody in prison if we put him in prison. Like, let's send him to Iceland.
Perfect Viking material. Right. Put them on that long ship and keep them a long way away from me.
You're strong, you're violent, you have a lot of things that are going to make you successful in this world. Why don't you go try and see if you can be successful in Newfoundland?
Right. If you survive the crossing, good luck. I think you're going to plunder and do well over there.
The good thing is or rather the interesting thing is, not only was there that settlement that was later found again, sort of buried in Newfoundland, long houses and things like that, but there were items that were found further south from there, which appeared to come from Vikings, and it's unclear to this day, were those just traded to people like indigenous people or others, and then like made their way down south, or did the Vikings actually at some point go south of Newfoundland and sort of along the Atlantic coast? I had never really fallen for the popular craze for like Viking stories and Viking TV and Viking movies, and I didn't watch Game of Thrones, but I have to say that backing into the area just with our interest in shipwrecks and sort of like, learning a little bit about the Vikings through their ships, it was an amazing 400 years they had. Like I said, 800s, 900s, 1000s, 1100s. They were on a roll, and they were doing what, all countries do once they get like really successful and build strength, which is like, okay, let's go, let's expand. It's what China's doing now. It's what America did, a little before, or England did. But
Well, and they had the technology, right? They had the ships. They had the ability to get there.
And they were great woodworkers, and they were great fishermen. They were very comfortable on the water because they were having to travel on rivers and fjords and sea. Like, they're great watermen, and hardy souls. That's cold ass water up there.
It seemed like they channeled their energies into destruction and plundering.
But you say that, but then look at it when you'll look at the pictures of the Oseberg ship,
Right.
and you're
Can't
like,
wait.
these carvings are. What else can I tell you about the Oseberg? That's it. So you can't go see it today. Museum's closed. If you and I are gonna go, we'll have to wait until 2025.
Time flies.
Can we do that?
We'll get there. Incredible. And sort of symbolic, maybe, in terms of the last ship of the season being one that was buried in the ground versus underwater.
I thought you were going to say, like, wait, dude, that's not a shipwreck, but
Yeah, I believe it's a shipwreck.
oh, great. Okay.
Yeah, I do.
Fantastic.
I do. I don't think we discern between it being buried in water versus land, because they both are time capsules. You're able to unearth something from the 800s, and it tells us the story of the Vikings. That's incredible.
Fun word for you. The burial mound, these huge mounds that are found around Scandinavia, the word for that is tumulus.
What?
That mound is called either a barrow or a tumulus. And if you've got a couple of them, they're tumuli.
Tumuli. Okay. Well, in my mind, a fantastic way to end season 3 of Killer Shipwrecks with a classic Viking style ship. Everyone in their mind can conjure up an image of a Viking ship.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
And also, the other thing is, like, we've talked about some different ships, types of ship this season: Spanish galleon, the Malay ship, the
interesting variety.
The gun ship, the destroyer escort.
Love the
And it seems to me like these Viking ships, it's not that they are waging war on the high seas. It's more just they're using them to get from point A to point B. And then when they get to point B, then we'll jump on land, and then that's when we'll raise hell.
Right. And incredible because when you consider like what technology was available and the fact that they had to somehow create these boats that were going to cross an ocean.
Yeah, with oarsmen. I mean, imagine
Incredible.
the frickin' guns on these guys who are oaring their way across the all the way to frickin' Newfoundland.
That's
I
insane.
mean, I do think of the Scandinavians as some of the, like, strongest dudes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, remember those old, what did they used to have on TV, like, in the '70s? They would have, like, strongest man contests
Yes.
and, like, lifting huge logs and stuff like that. They all look like Scandinavian.
Right. Very hardy.
Yeah.
Well, fantastic. So, Doctor, congrats on another great season, and I think we both want to express gratitude to all the good folks at Brainstorm. First season on the platform, and I thought it went very well. Great production.
They swooped in and they saved us. We thought maybe, we were done,
Mhm.
and, because we had a bit of a legal battle of our own.
Didn't end the way we wanted to with the former partner.
No, but Brainstorm gave us a platform, enabled us to go on, gave us the opportunity to do season 3, and now it sounds like they're extending a new opportunity to us, which is to branch out and do the show on biographies. So
We're finalizing the details of what that season will look like, but I think it's super interesting. I'm very excited about it, and I think it's exciting for Brainstorm, to expand, to branch out.
absolutely.
Unbelievable season. Very proud of all the ships we presented this season. So we will, for the final time in season 3, we will play our outro music, and we will see everybody potentially in a brand new series on Brainstorm related to biographies.
Fantastic. Been a pleasure.
Life jackets are stored in overhead racks on the first and second deck, and in storage boxes on the top deck. Instructions for donning life jackets are located around the vessel.
Brainstorm.